Sienna, I think we might have lost the screen. There we go. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. This is Kevin Robbins, CEO of Mid-Atlantic Employers Association, and thank you for joining us for our weekly Recovery and Growth webinar, although we're going to talk about a couple of sessions that will be missing coming up. I'll touch on that in a second. As we've talked about, we're in the second wave of the corona in terms of how things have changed and what we need to do to prepare and kind of thrive and survive in this environment we live in. So thanks for joining us today. Next Tuesday, we are going to be looking at technology enablers for HR as we move to a virtual workplace and trying to be as contactless as possible. There's whole new responsibilities on HR, as well as, which leads to a great time to kind of relook at the technology you have in place, and is it going to help you meet the challenges that are coming up in a new normal. So I hope you can join us for that. We are going to not have this on the 1st and the 8th. On September 1st, I'll talk about 1 minute, the exciting event we're doing that day. And then September 8th is the day after Labor Day, which I would normally say is our end of summer back to school, but we'll talk a little bit more about the back to school trials at the end. So, but in either event, we're going to take those two off and re-begin in September 15th. Okay, next slide. As we've said before, we are back with our in-person training. We've had some great classes. I think people are happy to be back in a safe and live environment. So we are comply with all state and CDC guidelines. We have plenty of space, plenty of room, all the cleaning. So these are two upcoming classes if you or someone on your team would be interested: stress management and diversity, inclusion, and civility in the workplace. So again, those are coming up in next week, so feel free to join us for those. And then I'm very excited. The reason we're not holding our Tuesday meeting on the September 1st is we are very excited about our leadership conference that we're running virtually. You can see the fabulous set of speakers we have here, headed up by Simon Sinek and Patrick Lencioni. Simon's new book, The Infinite Game, is what he'll be speaking about, which really is relevant in today's world. And Patrick Lencioni is the writer of many books, including The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a great business book. Our other two speakers are really interesting folks. Robin Benacasa is somebody that I'm learning more about, and incredible kind of endurance champion, and talks about leadership under stress. She's also set up an amazing foundation called the Athena Foundation, so you might want to check that out. She's a really interesting person. And then Captain Ron Johnson was involved with the Ferguson riots. He marched with the protesters, and again, this was 5 or 6 years ago, and talking about leadership in crisis and so on. So we are super excited. If you are a member, there's a $30 discount. You can see there the price. This is 12 to 4 virtual conference. These sessions will also be available for a couple of days. So if you have a conflict with some or all that time, please still register, and you have access to hear these great speakers. Next slide. As always, we will send out after today the presentation as well as the webinar recording. Feel free to share that with anybody on your team. If you do have questions during our speakers, if you could type them into the Q&A or chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can, but again, if you have anything that you didn't get answers to, feel free as a member to call our hotline or MEA legal support, or email us at hotline@meainfo.org. So with that, let me just review what we're going to cover today. We're very excited. Again, because of the new normal, I think everyone has even more focus on our employee well-being, especially when we're working in a partially or full virtual world. How do we know what's going on with employees, and how can we help them take better care of themselves? We're very pleased to have Mike McGrath, the CEO of one of our partners, the Charge Group, with us today to talk about that. Usually you'll see Amy McAndrew's name under the COVID-19. Amy is on a well-deserved vacation this week, but she is, we got some power subs. The rest of the legal and compliance team: Sienna Williams, who is our senior employment counsel and head of our diversity and inclusion group, and Jane Disher, who most of you know from our MEA hotline, will be here talking about COVID-19 as well as employee litigation. So unfortunately, that's becoming a new hot thing, and we're going to tell you what's going on out there with that. So let me turn it over to Mike, And again, glad you joined us today.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Really appreciate your time. Very excited to be here. So I'm just going to share our screen here. While we're doing that, just want to talk a little bit about kind of how we got here today. I've been in the employee health and wellness sector for the last 10 years, and was really grateful enough to start in an employee wellness company about 4 years ago. So we partnered with MEA about 2.5 years ago. So we've been a guest speaker in some of these events before, and we're just really excited to be here. So kind of pivoting to really the topic that we wanted to pertain today. So employee well-being in the time of COVID-19. Pretty interesting topic, just like a lot of topics in terms of employee concerns. How do we interact? What are our intentions? How do we communicate in this time frame? A lot of challenges, and actually a lot of ways that we can grow and retain and connect with our employees. So we're going to talk about a few different topics today. One of them is really a strategic versus tactical standpoint. So strategy, how do we communicate? How do we interact? What types of things are we doing, for our employees to keep them engaged, retained? Self-care is another topic that is really trending right now, in terms of employee health. And then, I think, at least personally, I read a lot of articles, see a lot of guest speakers really talk about this macro strategy. And, I got to thinking when coming into, this opportunity, can we give some tactical advice? So actually diving into even preventative health. Are there services inside of insurance carriers, health plans that we can utilize? Because at least in our experience over the last 4 or 5 years working at Charge, we work with a lot of groups that have never done anything before in terms of preventative health, employee wellness, or well-being. So are there resources that we can use today that maybe we didn't know about? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to split our time today, and we're really excited to dive in here. So kind of the quick summary, we're going to talk about what is this new well-being topic that we hear about? How is it different from wellness? Is it different from wellness? And we're going to kind of differentiate the two. As Kevin just said a few minutes ago, whether you're a hybrid or whether you're 100% virtual, virtual offerings and resources, we believe, are here to stay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I talked a little bit before about the strategy versus tactical piece. In our organization, we really break that down so that we can dissect projects accordingly. So we take the strategy and then move into the tactical. We're going to do that today on this call. And then we're going to wrap it up discussing about preventative health benefits. Is there anything in your insurance plan that you could be utilizing to offer to your employees, both on-site and virtually? And then on that tactical side, we're going to wrap up with 5 ways to boost employee health. And we're going to give actual 5 ways and tips to walk away with that hopefully you didn't know about a few of these, and you can start implementing with your team ASAP. So really excited to walk into that. And why don't we start? So what is well-being, guys? I mean, it's a very interesting topic. At least from my perspective, whenever I hear well-being, I think about wellness, I think about health. I saw a very interesting quote the other day from Susie Ellis. She's the CEO of the Global Wellness Institute. And she shaped it like this that I thought was pretty interesting. So going forward, when you think about wellness, think about prevention and health. So that traditional healthcare offerings, really diving into that aspect, which we're going to do later in this call. And when you think about well-being, she kind of defines as think about happiness. I would also add a little bit to that, right? So we talk about happiness, we talk about work-life balance. We talk about stress in the workplace. So it's really this holistic viewpoint of, 7, 10 different categories that you can kind of measure or offer in terms of your programming. But at least internally, in our organization, that well-being versus wellness, it's really all encompassed. What are your intentions with employees and your team? And, maybe the definition doesn't matter as much as, how you're tackling these types of programmings or offerings. So, we always talk about what's the company culture like. So is the company culture strong enough? Is it set up in a way that you can even roll out programs or offerings like this? So, we're going to kind of think about the answers to some of those questions later, but it poses a very interesting culture piece in that, let's be realistic. If you're an HR director, if you're a CFO, if you're a CEO, if you're in C-suite, and you're in operations, whatever your role is in the organization, really being honest with, yourself and your team members, like, what are my resources? What have I done in the past where I could make, something successful for now and into the future? And when we talk about cutting through the noise, there are so many vendors out there. I mean, if you're an HR director, if you're in operations, if you're on LinkedIn, right, you get messages potentially every day, someone trying to sell you something. Maybe not specifically in wellness and well-being, maybe it's marketing, maybe, it's a software company, whatever it is, especially in this time where in-person, meetings are at an all-time low. The internet is a very interesting thing now, where we can have really anyone at our fingertips. So it's kind of cutting through the noise and looking at vendors that can actually drive value immediately. And I've used this word a couple times already. So however we want to define the topic, it all comes down to intention with the organization and, how the company culture kind of acts in kind of fruition to these programmings and offerings. So, to talk a little bit about the virtual era, right? That could be a whole presentation in itself. But, I think today, if when speaking to HR directors, et cetera, it's, we really want to make it flexible for employees. Give programs and offerings that not only can you can set dedicated time for employees to come together, kind of even in a group setting potentially, and Q&A, share experiences, depending on what the event is. Also give things to employees that they can do on their own time. That flexibility is really crucial in this time period. Of course, being easy and accessible, right? If there's too many steps, we all know, especially in this era, our attention is limited, right? So we're getting hit up so many more times with so many different aspects of our professional and even personal kind of lifestyle. We need to make it easy and accessible. So, we always have this conversation when we talk with employer groups. How do we drive engagement? Because if we don't drive engagement, the risk of fizzling out is always there. So really strategizing on what's the engagement strategy, how do we roll it out to employees, what is the strategy, so that we can make sure that the tactical is in line with that strategic plan. And last but not least, in this virtual era, I think, with the flexibility is think about multi-tier programming. So kind of like we talked about before, is our communication consistent? Are we offering group aspects? Are we offering, small groups or even private one-on-one communication styles? Are there programs that we can offer that kind of cut through the noise and can be one-on-one to work on whatever the goals are, in the organization or with the individual? And I saw a really interesting stat, kind of fascinating, recently, a couple months ago, from Stanford University, that virtual offerings can boost engagement up to 87%. So again, whether you're 100%, back on site, whether it's some sort of hybrid, or whether you're 100% virtual, the goal is to offer flexible, easy, and accessible programs for your employees. So we talked a little bit about this, the strategy versus tactical. Let's be realistic about our culture. Do we have upper level management support? And one of the biggest things that we see is, let's just pick something, we vet it out, obviously do our due diligence, but let's just pick a starting point and start moving forward. Because when we move into the tactical, of course, in terms of programming and vendors, we've already done all of that vetting and due diligence. So it's really just doing the upfront work, kind of pre-launch to any offering, for employees. So before we dive into the 5 ways to boost employee health, we're going to talk a little bit about preventative health benefits. It's a space that we've become experts in, and it's a very interesting space to be in right now. So when we talk to employer groups every day, when talking about wellness or well-being offerings, what's the budget, right? So when we started Charge, our goal was to really tackle the preventative health benefit inside of insurance plans. So typically those programs are very budget friendly. They might even be covered 100% by the health insurance plan. So are there offerings, are there programs inside of preventative health that you can offer that are budget friendly? So moving through that, starting to think about a couple things, right? So we work with a lot of employer groups in the Mid-Atlantic area, and the most successful programs, some of the most successful programs, provide some sort of incentive. It doesn't have to be monetary. It can be anything that comes to mind, right? We work with a lot of different groups that incentivize their employees in a lot of different ways, typically in a positive aspect, right? We have worked with organizations that almost use it as a kind of a bait and switch, or, it comes off a little bit negative, and typically it doesn't go as well. I mean, when approaching these programs, I always think about myself as a user. Do I want to be positively incentivized or negative? And I think we somewhat all know that answer. So we've seen a lot of organizations positively incentivize their employees towards healthy behaviors in a low or no cost way. So in saying all that, the most successful preventative health programs, communication is consistent. So it comes out, bi-weekly or monthly. Employees expect it, and they can then engage. And maybe they won't engage in the first 30, 60, 90 days. But if the organization consistently communicates that there are resources there that they can take advantage of, then they're more likely to interact somewhere down the road. So, last but not least, when we talk about preventative health benefits, we talk about, just like incentives, you may or may not do that. That's okay. But think about how the organization is going to measure success, because that can be done in a lot of different ways. Also, it could be just something as simple as participation. What's the percentage of employees that are participating? What's the percentage of family members that are participating? If there's a program that can be offered to, employees with spouse dependents, et cetera. So how are we measuring success? Is it participation? Is it data analytics? There's a lot of different ways to measure that. And when we kind of start this off, no matter where you are as an organization, really start to think about how you're measuring success, and maybe more importantly, how you're defining success. So when we jump into the 5 ways to boost employee health, really excited to not only talk about these 5 key areas. And when we talk about these 5 key areas, nothing's going to come to potentially a surprise, right? We've all heard of these 5 things, but our goal is to talk about why they're important and actually give examples so that you guys can do your research and walk away with some tactical items to actually act upon and create some motion. So, huge buzzword, rightly so, is mental health, right? And we started that number 1 for a reason, because a lot of organizations are really zoned in on how can we support our employees' mental health, self-care, in this time where employees, could be riding a roller coaster like we all are in this time frame at times. So, I mean, I said this earlier, we could create a presentation on just each one of these, but we talk about mental health, talk about stress management, in the workplace, mindfulness practices, small breaks throughout the day to reset and kind of reconnect so that we can be more efficient and productive throughout the day and throughout the week. And the importance of sleep, right? Each person's so different. Not, it doesn't work for everyone to go to bed at 10 p.m. and wake up at 6 a.m. But finding that rhythm that works for you, mental health is a huge topic right now. And one that we've used and kind of vetted ourselves is Headspace. So if you haven't heard of Headspace, take a look at it. Very interesting offering. It's very scalable. It's all done, through an app, and very accessible for employees. They offer group discounting, et cetera. Or, another one is Breathe and Think is an app that in April. We actually use this internally. We have Independence Blue Cross as our healthcare provider, healthcare carrier, and we actually use this internally because they put out an article saying, hey, everyone gets this for free for a month. So Breathe Think is really a Headspace competitor and really uses kind of the same aspects as that. So mental health is a big topic right now, and really moving into the second way to kind of boost employee health is really a topic that maybe isn't really thought about too much from an employer-employee perspective. So physical therapy is now a piece that can be done virtually to help chronic conditions, aches and pains, injury prevention and treatment. I mean, I think we all know, probably more than ever, the ergonomics of our body. Are we being cognizant? When you're in the workplace, you're more likely to get up and go to lunch, walk around, go to the water cooler, maybe interact with employees, colleagues. It's changed today, so it's a little different, and really focusing on the ergonomics and making sure that we're staying healthy and our body's healthy. Physaria is a great company that's doing that virtual physical therapy, really cool offering that you guys can look at too. So another way to kind of boost employee health that, again, maybe we don't think about too much outside of the benefit plan is dental health. A company that's doing that really well is called Henry the Dentist. They actually roll up with a big RV right outside of your workplace, and you can see, this is actually a picture inside of their RV, and employees can come in, get preventative dental work done. Obviously, this is more of an on-site offering. It's not necessarily virtual, but I mean, there's a lot of statistics that show that oral health is very important to our overall health and can actually lead to or exacerbate, other, health risks like diabetes, et cetera. So preventing tooth decay, personal hygiene, and like I said, really decreasing that chronic risk is the goal. And Henry the Dentist is an organization that's doing some really cool things. So last two and not least, so number 4 is fitness. So Global Fit is a company that we've actually partnered with, and they offer very large discounted gym memberships, both in person, of course, and virtually through training and classes. Big insurance carriers like Independence Blue Cross and Aetna, et cetera, have partnered with them. They deliver services at little to no cost. Very interesting business model, and something that really think that it's worth checking into if you haven't heard of Global Fit yet, or if you're not offering something already from a fitness or movement perspective. they're doing a fantastic job. So last but not least, shameless plug here, so nutrition. So this is started the Charge Group 4 years ago. Nutrition, we are experts in, and we're going to talk a little bit about that now and even in the future. So what you can offer for your employees is you can actually meet one-on-one with a nutritionist via telehealth. You're talking to nutritionists that will personalize food and nutrition plans. And this is all covered by your health insurance carrier. No cost to employees. So if you have Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, United, Highmark, other carriers, this can be a preventative benefit that your employees can take advantage of. And, now more than ever, it's something that can be scaled, across the organization, whether, you're located in Philadelphia or whether you're located in Colorado, or you have remote employees across the nation. This is a preventative benefit through nutrition coaching that Charge offers. And we'll talk more about that, later on. So last but not least, folks, so what's next, right? I mean, 4 quick tips, and then we're going to kick it back over to MEA. So, we talk about company culture, right? What can we do very quickly, especially in this time frame, to add value to our employees? Do I need to ask colleagues? Do I need to ask C-suite? If I am C-suite, I can just roll this out, or maybe you have the reciprocity to just roll it out yourselves. But kind of vetting that out. What's our company culture? What's worked in the past? What hasn't? So that then we can think about how we're engaging and offering these things to employees. And also, let's be realistic. We don't need to tackle all 5 of these at first. Let's just set some intentions, keep it simple, and utilize your resources. Like we talked about today in those 5 tips, 5 ways to boost employee health. There are resources that you can use today that are covered under your benefit plan. So please dive into those. We'd love to take any questions on any of the things that we talked about today, and appreciate your time.
Mike, thanks very much. I'm going to give the Charge Group a personal endorsement. We have used them at MEA for about 3 years now, and most of our employees have gone through it. I personally have done it. It's coaching, which I think for many of us, it's a great way to do this. It's one-on-one. You're having someone that gets to know you, get your behaviors. I think most importantly for me, it's always been coaching, not telling. And so they work with you and adapt to you. When they moved to virtual, it happened very quick. So I've done the virtual as well. And it makes it so much easier. It's literally, you're just jumping on whenever it fits you and the coach's schedule, and it's the same feeling. Like I said, I've done this for 3 years. I'm very proud of myself, but over the last year, I've lost 25 pounds, and I attribute a lot of it to the coaching because they helped me change behaviors, looked at the way I ate, not what I ate, as well as what I ate. So we're very pleased to offer a new way of working with Charge. We've always done a company program where you work with Charge, they come into your company. I think we have like 45 or 50 members that use them. Now with this virtual, we are able to offer to you to send out directly to your employees kind of their ability to access this program. So you see here, this is the landing page where someone can go in and sign up for the coaching. And the great part about this process is they put a little bit of information in each employee, and they'll be told, whether it's covered by insurance, how many sessions they can have. They can book everything here. So it's super easy to do. There's no cost to employees. Doing it this way, there's no administration by you because all you're doing is, forwarding that information onto the employees. And it also covers families, and frankly, it covers anybody because it's all based on whatever insurance someone has. So even if your company, has 50% of employees covered by your healthcare, they're most likely covered by a spouse or someone else's. Everybody's covered because it's not tied to your healthcare plan. So we will send out this link today as part of and when we send out the materials to this landing page. I encourage you all to do a trial. Just go in and do yourselves, or send it to your family so you can see how it works. If you're interested, what we'll do in the next week or so is we'll be sending out emails that you can use with your employee base that kind of promote this from you to them. And again, if you'd like to talk with Mike more about doing a corporate program to kind of really align with your culture, we've been doing that forever and we'll continue to, but we're very excited about, again, giving you something to give to all your employee base and their families, which I think has a tremendous impact. So Mike, thank you again for that. And we are going to now turn it over to our legal and compliance group. Sienna?
All right, thank you, Kevin. I'm going to get our slides back up there. All right, perfect. That was awesome. Jane and I are going to talk briefly. I'm so excited to try out the charge stuff because I know most MEA employees have, and I have not yet. Partly because, true confession, time crunched, and the last person I focus on putting up time and energy towards is often myself. So I actually love and really appreciate Mike and Kevin that you've made this like so simple because it's actually having me take that leap now because it is so easy to do. So thank you. But now, yeah, we'll switch topics for a bit and talk about COVID-19. We have been kind of down in the weeds, the nitty gritty, which is extremely important for the last several weeks though, sort of for a lot of this COVID-19 stuff, right? Sort of the FFCRA provisions, how do we administer it? How do we apply it? All of the myriad of, 1,000+ different situations that come up among our employees. And are they entitled to take the leave? What's pay? All of that. But it's important to kind of, and that's what we're going to do a little bit today. And good news is the bigger picture is indicating to us that continue doing what you're doing in terms of compliance. All right. But let's talk about it. So there have been a number of lawsuits that have been filed pertaining to COVID-19. And Amy has been predicting this would happen. We have been mentioning it whenever we're talking with members, and it is in fact now happening. So this law firm, Fisher & Phillips, they maintain actually a COVID-19 litigation tracker. And it's one of the most comprehensive collections of data on this topic and gives us an idea of trends, right? And what's happening out there. Because we're still very early on in terms of plaintiffs' attorneys recognizing what areas are going to be the biggest pain points and moving forward, right? And getting those clients and moving forward, but it is happening. And here's a visual in terms of the map. You can see New Jersey has got quite a few complaints going on. So we see a lot of COVID litigation concentrated in California, Texas, Florida, and New Jersey. But Pennsylvania isn't totally in the clear either, right? As was expected. So in terms of exact numbers, we've had about 430. These are private actions, right, filed by current or former employees against employers in the courts, federal and state courts across the U.S. Filed. And so attorneys have read through those cases and tried to glean what can we see, what's happening, what can we learn in terms of what plaintiffs' attorneys are focusing on. And they're focused on the topics that we've been touching upon. So surprisingly, most of them are not focused around FFCRA, but use COVID more as a backdrop, right? So some of us maybe thought, well, wow, we've been in the weeds of FFCRA all this time. That's where people will be focused. Not quite yet, though we do see regulators focused in that area, right? So you got to keep in mind the regulators are looking at that, and it's important to maintain that compliance. But the individual sort of plaintiffs' attorneys are focusing on discrimination type claims, right? And that runs the gamut when you look at the cases. So based on age is coming up a good amount, race, national origin, and this comes into play against the backdrop of COVID-19, right? So some of the cases are alleging just what we were thinking would happen, but sort of, who you selected for a RIF or a layoff or a furlough, how you selected them, right? That criteria and that process was discriminatory or had a disproportionate impact on a particular group. And so here it's important to keep in mind reminders that we shared with you early on, and Jane will be talking in a bit. And I remember Jane sort of me sharing and mentioning that Jane is really good at this process in terms of before a member sort of takes that step of implementing their RIF or their layoff, of helping them walk through, are you setting objective criteria? Are you consistently applying those standards? And very importantly, doing an adverse impact analysis, right? So that you recognize before you make those decisions, what's happening. It's the same thing when you're bringing people back. So if you're still in that process of bringing people back, you've got to have the same criteria in mind in terms of, are we only bringing back one particular category of individuals? What are we basing those decisions on? And you want those decisions to be based on defensible criteria, right? Which happen to be more fair and consistent criteria. So that's just absolutely something to keep in mind. One of the lawsuits that I had looked over, it was about older workers not being returned to the workplace after a furlough. So the allegation was, look, you only brought back the younger people. To the older people, you made severance offers, right? Once that furlough period was ending. And some individuals did not accept the severance and instead said, I'm filing suit. So something to keep in mind. And then wrongful death lawsuits, actually. These were sort of the two themes that emerged from those 400 plus COVID lawsuits that have been filed. And the failures here, it's interesting because these wrongful death suits, they're claiming an injury from work, right? A COVID-19, sort of acquiring COVID or becoming infected with COVID through work. And typically those kind of injuries are covered under our workers' compensation system. But what plaintiffs' attorneys are alleging is that the conduct in not following recommended safety directives or not providing enough PPE, those are two of the themes they're focusing on, that conduct was willful and wanton failure to follow recommended safety precautions in the workplace. That takes it out of the realm, potentially, that's what they're arguing, of workers' compensation, which creates that workers' compensation essentially caps and limits the amount of damages that get paid to workers because of these injuries. Now that takes it out of that realm and puts it in a sort of a more precarious position for employers where damages could be much higher than they would under workers' compensation. So again, that's why it's important for us to stay focused on the nitty gritty that we do focus on week to week, right? Of having a safety plan in place. We have a free downloadable plan that you can tailor to your organization. If you don't have one in place, go ahead, download that document, tailor it to yourself. If you're a member, email it into Hotline and we will look it over for you and answer any questions you have about implementing it for members, of course. And then that training, make sure you're either doing it or you're sending folks to be trained on how to implement that plan. In Pennsylvania, you've got to have your pandemic safety officer. In other states, you got to do it for this reason, right? Because you want to be able to point to something and say, look, we were following all the required steps. And of course, you want to be sort of creating and providing that safe workplace. So just a couple of reminders. And for those of you who in your free time want to check out what's happening in the litigation, a site where you can do that. And now I will turn it over to Jane Disher, who runs our hotline.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So just wanted to give you a quick sort of update on what's been happening on the hotline. On the plus side, I'm happy to report we are starting to see more calls and emails with non-COVID related items, which is delightful. So to the degree that we're returning to some semblance of normal, I think that's an indication. So thank you for those calls. But I would say on the COVID side, there are two big buckets of questions and issues that we're seeing fairly consistently. And the first has to do with this idea of self-quarantine for hotspots, because Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, it's a mandatory quarantine. In New Jersey and PA, as you know, it's recommended. But what to do about people who are returning from these hotspots and whether to self-quarantine and for how long. I had a quick email this morning from someone asking about someone who had traveled to a hotspot on Friday, came back Sunday, tested negative and wants to come back to work. And the question is, should they? But a negative test at this point doesn't necessarily mean that the employee won't contract the virus. So we are starting to see, lots of questions about that. I also learned this morning that apparently in Pennsylvania, North Carolina has been removed from the list of hotspots. So we'll double check the PA Department of Health to make sure that the most current information is available. The other piece that is the other big bucket of questions and concerns and issues is around back to school. And that is something that I think is going to be an evolving situation, because as schools start to return to whatever version of whether it's in person or a hybrid model or virtual learning, how to deal with those back to school challenges. And, I think for us in the legal and compliance realm, I know a lot of you are looking for definitive answers on this, and we just don't have them right now. And I'd say particularly with the school issue, I think this is something that's going to be changing. I don't know if you saw yesterday, University of North Carolina started classes a week ago in person. As of tomorrow, they're going virtual because they've had an increase in the positivity rate from something around 2.9% to almost 14% in the course of a week. So I think we can expect to see, as things start to open up a little bit, more of those kinds of situations where it's, and this is very much like where we were in the beginning of all of this, and we were still trying to sort this out. So one of the things I think that would be helpful for us, and particularly for all of you as members, if you have policies or processes or protocols that you've put in place regarding these two issues in particular, the self-quarantine for hotspots and back to school, that you would be willing to share with other members, I would ask that you please send them to me at hotline@mbainfo.org, because people are looking for answers. And I think if you have information, things that have worked for you that might be useful or helpful to another member, or I would also add, not just sharing policies, but if you'd be willing to be a resource for another member who may want to talk through an issue, let me know that, and we'll make sure that we can get you connected as well. So with that, I'm turning it back over to Kevin.
So, and I would say, Jane, it's brilliant, what you're asking members to do here. Thank you, because this sort of flexibility that businesses have to try and create, right, where they have employees who are able to come in and work, but then suddenly, their school district switches to remote and they have to change. Sort of those approaches for creating that flexibility are going to be very industry specific, right? The type of work you're doing. And so really do need that learning from.
The back to school in particular is going to be very fluid because it will change.
That's great. Yeah, and I'll just make one point. And guys, that was a great summary. I mean, MEA, we're a nonprofit. We've created a community of businesses, and these are businesses that are with us not only to get their answers, but as Jane said, this is like what our best practices. And we run a variety of peer groups and roundtables, and it's very consistent with our approach. Is we're all trying to succeed and grow in this environment. This is not competitive. If you don't want us to share your company name when you send us a policy, that's fine. We won't do that. But we're all wrestling through this. And I always, I'm an attorney, recovering attorney. They won't let me practice it. This world right now, it's a risk-reward analysis on every single issue. There's no right or wrong, but there's different levels of risk people are willing to take, which is very dynamic and based on what's happening today. So the more we share and learn with each other, and which is why we're putting this on every week. It benefits all of us, because at the end of the day, we all want to just run our businesses and grow, and we're very proud that we get to play that kind of pivot role between all the businesses in the region. So, like, again, if you're willing to share, or if you have questions, want to talk to others, we'll do the best we can to help you with that. So with that, we're going to say goodbye for today. We're right on schedule at our quarter up. We will see you next week when we'll talk about, again, updates on all the legal and compliance issues, as well as, other forms of technology that are being used. I think the whole thing with COVID and the new normal is, whether you've gone virtual or not, it's kind of forced us to look at technology to do what we need to do better in today's world. And there's so many things out there I think we've put off that we're all kind of looking and saying, what other ways I can do it? So it is a little bit of forced change, and we're trying to keep informing you as much as we can about what opportunities or choices are out there for you. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next week.